Did movies look better before CGI took over? I don't mean bigger or louder or more expensive. I mean better. Because somewhere between the practical sets, the film grain, and the real-world lighting, cinema just felt different. And maybe, just maybe, the 1990s were the last great era of truly stylized cinematography. Now, this isn't about nostalgia, and it's not about the music or the dialogue. This is purely about how films were shot. The camera angles, the lens choices, the movement, the lighting, the physical presence of the sets. There was a confidence in 90s cinematography that just feels harder to find today. So the big question is, did cinematography actually peak in the 90s? Or did filmmaking just change forever? Let's start with the camera. In the 90s, camera placement felt incredibly intentional. Sometimes it was theatrical, sometimes it was bold, but it was always deliberate. Take Pulp Fiction. You know, the shot I'm talking about, the trunk shot. It's a low angle, using a wide lens, with the characters looming over the camera. Now, that's not realistic at all. It's pure style, but it makes you feel like you're right there, inside the boot of the car. That's using a lens choice to tell a story. Then you look at a film like Heat from 1995. For the iconic downtown shootout, director Michael Mann used long lenses. This has an effect of compressing the space, making the sprawling streets of LA feel claustrophobic and tight. You feel trapped in the firefight right alongside the characters. Or think about Seven. David Fincher constantly used tight framing and controlled deep darkness to make the entire world feel oppressive and suffocating. In the 90s, cinematographers were not afraid of deep shadows, eye contrast, unusual angles, or holding a shot for a long take. Every shot had its own identity. Now let's compare that to a lot of modern films, especially big studio productions. You often see a few recurring trends. There's the shallow depth of field everywhere, blurring out the background. There's an overuse of handheld camera work, but it's often paired with heavy digital stabilization, which can sometimes feel a bit generic. And there's a tendency to shoot with safe coverage, meaning they get lots of different angles to give editors maximum flexibility later on. The result is often cleaner and technically perfect, but sometimes it feels less distinctive. The 90s were a unique bridge era. CGI existed, but it wasn't the dominant force it is today. Jurassic Park is the perfect example. Most people remember it as being revolutionary because of the CGI dinosaurs, and it was. But think about that T-Rex scene, the dinosaur itself. That was a massive physical animatronic. The rain was practical, the lighting was real, hitting real surfaces and real actors. The CGI was used sparingly to enhance what was already there. The result, the light behaved naturally. The shadows were real, and the actors had something huge and terrifying to physically react to. Then, as we moved into the early 2000s, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy used massive miniatures, which they called bigatures. Entire mountains, cities, and fortresses were physically built to an incredible scale and then enhanced digitally. That beautiful blend of the practical and the digital created a tangible sense of depth and reality. But when shooting on green screen became the dominant method in the mid-2000s, the whole approach to lighting changed. Actors were often placed in very flat, neutral lighting setups, standing in sterile environments that would later be filled in by a digital world. And even with the incredible technology we have today, there's just something about real light hitting real texture that is incredibly difficult to fake. Now, I know I said this wasn't about music, but I think the music of the era tells us something important about the era's entire philosophy. Think about the iconic John Williams scores for films like Jurassic Park, Star Wars, and Schindler's List. They are incredibly melodic and thematic. De Arbold. They tell you exactly what the story is about on an emotional level. Then you have Hans Zimmer, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. With Gladiator and The Lion King, he still worked with incredibly strong, memorable musical themes. Now compare that to a lot of modern blockbuster scoring. It often leans more towards texture and atmosphere. It's less about melody and more about creating a mood. Cinematography followed a very similar path. 90s films were not afraid of having strong visual themes. Think of the golden, hopeful warmth of The Shawshank Redemption, or the sickly greens and yellows that permeate the world of Seven, the cool, neon-drenched crime aesthetic of Heat at Night. Today's films can look technically perfect, absolutely flawless, but sometimes they can feel visually interchangeable. Another huge reason the 90s feel so special was the prevalence of original storytelling. Back then, studios were still consistently greenlighting mid-budget thrillers, adult dramas, character-driven crime films, and high-concept original ideas. Just think of the films that came out: The Matrix, Fight Club, The Sixth Sense, Fargo, being John Malkovich. Because these weren't franchise-first projects, the cinematography was free to reflect the unique story it was telling, rather than trying to maintain brand consistency. The Matrix used that iconic green tint and controlled lighting to represent a digital world. Fight Club embraced gritty, chaotic handheld work to mirror the main character's psychological instability. Today, many of the largest productions exist inside of massive cinematic universes, and those universes need visual continuity. That can, understandably, limit stylistic risk-taking. When every single movie has to fit the established look and feel of a brand, truly bold and unique cinematography becomes a much harder thing to achieve. Now, let's be fair. Modern cinematography can be absolutely stunning. Films like Blade Runner 2049, 1917, The Revenant, and Dune are visual masterpieces. Technically speaking, we are living in the most advanced era of filmmaking ever. Digital cameras have incredible dynamic range, unbelievable low-light performance, and perfect color control. But technology does not automatically equal identity. The 90s were limited, and limitation forces creativity. When you couldn't just say, "We'll fix it in post," you had to get it right in camera. You had to design the shot, the lighting, the set. That discipline gave films a powerful personality. And here's why all of this matters, especially if you're a creator yourself. Audiences are starting to crave that texture again. They want to see film grain, contrast, intentional framing, and physical lighting. The 90s aesthetic is making a comeback because, in a world of hyper-clean digital content, that man niet veel real. So, if you're making YouTube videos or short films, or even just designing thumbnails, leaning into some of those principles can make your content instantly more cinematic. Things like controlled lighting, intentional lens choices, bold composition, and stylized color grading can make your work stand out. So, did cinematography peak in the 90s? Technically, no, but philosophically, I think maybe it did. It was the last great era where physical craft, practical sets, bold lens choices, and limited CGI all combined at their full maturity. It wasn't better just because it was older. It was different because it had constraints. And sometimes, those constraints are what create true art. Thanks for watching.